what if I told you that nothing in your life is random? That conversation you had with a stranger, that song that came on the radio at the perfect moment, that opportunity that fell into your lap, that setback that seemed so unfair, none of it is coincidence. There are divine messages hidden in what you think are ordinary moments, and today you're going to learn how to decode them. We live in a world that has convinced us that life is just a series of random events. Lucky breaks and unfortunate circumstances, right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time, pure chance and simple coincidence. But what if everything you've been taught about randomness is wrong? What if every seemingly insignificant moment is actually a divine appointment? What if every coincidence is actually God's way of getting your attention? What if the very things you dismiss as chance encounters are actually heaven's way of communicating with you? Today, you're going to discover that God is constantly speaking to you through what I call silent messages. Divine communications that come disguised as ordinary life events. These messages are happening all around you every single day. But most people miss them completely because they don't know what to look for. The truth is, God is not distant or silent. He's actively involved in the details of your daily life, orchestrating moments, arranging encounters, and sending you messages that are designed to guide you, encourage you, and remind you that you're never alone. But these messages don't come in the dramatic ways we often expect. They come quietly, subtly, woven into the fabric of your everyday experience. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely new understanding of how God communicates with you. You'll learn to recognize the 7 most common types of silent messages that He sends, and you'll never again feel like you're wandering through life without divine guidance. But here's what's really exciting. Once you start recognizing these messages, you'll realize that God has been speaking to you all along. You'll look back on events in your life and suddenly see the divine fingerprints that were there the whole time. You'll understand that what you thought were coincidences were actually confirmations, and what seemed like random encounters were actually divine interventions. So if you're ready to discover the secret language that God uses to communicate with you, if you want to learn how to recognize His voice in the everyday moments of your life, then pay close attention to what I'm about to share. Because nothing, absolutely nothing in your life is random. The first silent message that God often uses to communicate with you is through repeated numbers and patterns. Have you ever noticed the same number showing up everywhere you look? You glance at the clock and it's 11:11. Your receipt total is $11.11. You get a text message at 1:11. The address of a building you randomly visit is 11:11. This isn't coincidence. It's God getting your attention. Throughout the Bible, numbers carry deep spiritual significance. 7 represents completion, 3 represents divine perfection, 12 represents governmental authority, 40 represents testing and preparation. When you start seeing the same numbers repeatedly, God is often trying to communicate something specific to you based on the spiritual meaning of those numbers. But it's not just about biblical numerology. Sometimes God uses numbers that are personally significant to you. Maybe you keep seeing your birthday, your anniversary, or a date that holds special meaning. Maybe it's a number that was important to someone you lost. These repeated sightings aren't random. They're divine nudges designed to get your attention and remind you that God is present in your life. The key to understanding this silent message is paying attention to what's happening in your life when you notice these patterns. What are you thinking about when you see the repeated number? What decision are you facing? What prayer have you been praying? The timing of when you notice these patterns is often just as important as the patterns themselves. For example, if you've been praying about a major decision and you start seeing the number 3 everywhere, God might be reminding you of His divine perfection and encouraging you to trust His guidance. If you're going through a season of testing and you keep seeing the number 40, He might be confirming that this is a preparation period and encouraging you to persevere. Sometimes these patterns appear in unexpected places. You might notice them on license plates, phone numbers, addresses, timestamps, prices, or even in the number of likes on a social media post. The more unusual or unexpected the place, the more likely it is that God is trying to get your attention. Don't dismiss these patterns as mere coincidence. Start keeping track of when and where you see them. Pay attention to what's happening in your life during these moments. Ask God what He's trying to tell you through these repeated numbers. You might be amazed at how clearly He speaks once you start paying attention. But numbers and patterns are just the beginning. God has other ways of sending silent messages that might surprise you. The second type of silent message that God uses is unexpected encounters, what I like to call divine appointments. These are the chance meetings with people who show up at exactly the right time with exactly what you need to hear, see, or experience. You're struggling with a decision, and a stranger in an elevator makes a comment that gives you perfect clarity. You're feeling discouraged, and someone calls you out of the blue with exactly the encouragement you needed. You're facing a challenge, and you randomly run into someone who has faced the exact same situation and can offer wisdom. The Bible is full of divine appointments. Ruth happened to glean in the field of Boaz. Philip was led to encounter the Ethiopian eunuch on a desert road. Jesus had to go through Samaria and met the woman at the well. These weren't accidents. They were divine orchestrations. When God wants to send you a message through a person, He doesn't always use your pastor, your best friend, or someone you know well. Often, He uses unexpected messengers, strangers, acquaintances, or people you haven't spoken to in years. This is because when the message comes from an unexpected source, you're more likely to pay attention and recognize it as divine communication. These divine appointments often have several characteristics. First, the timing is uncanny. The person shows up exactly when you need them most. Second, they often know things about your situation that they shouldn't know, or they share advice that perfectly addresses your specific need. Third, there's often a sense of recognition or connection that goes beyond the natural. You feel like this encounter was meant to happen. Sometimes these encounters are brief but profound. A few words from a cashier, a smile from a child, a gesture from a neighbor. Don't underestimate the power of these seemingly small interactions. God often uses simple moments to deliver profound messages. Other times, these encounters lead to longer conversations or relationships that significantly impact your life. Someone you meet by chance becomes a mentor, a friend, or even a spouse. A casual conversation leads to a job opportunity, a ministry connection, or a life-changing revelation. The key to recognizing divine appointments is being present and paying attention. When you have an unexpected encounter, ask yourself, what is God trying to tell me through this person? What is the message in this meeting? What do I need to learn from this interaction? Also, remember that you might be the divine appointment for someone else. When you feel prompted to speak to someone, to offer help, or to share encouragement, you might be God's messenger in their life. These promptings are often God's way of using you to deliver His silent messages to others. But there's another type of silent message that's even more personal. The third way God sends silent messages is through dreams, songs that seem to play at perfect moments, and messages that come through movies, books, or social media posts that speak directly to your situation. These communications often feel like God is reaching through everyday media to speak specifically to you. Dreams have been God's communication method since ancient times. Joseph interpreted dreams for Pharaoh, Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, and Joseph received direction through dreams about Mary's pregnancy. While not every dream is a divine message, some dreams carry profound spiritual significance and guidance for your life. Pay attention to dreams that are unusually vivid, that stick with you throughout the day, or that seem to address specific situations you're facing. Dreams that repeat or contain clear symbolic elements often carry messages worth exploring. The key is asking God for interpretation and wisdom about what He might be communicating through your dream life. But perhaps even more common are the songs that seem to play at exactly the right moment. You're driving and praying about a situation, and a song comes on the radio with lyrics that perfectly address your prayer. You're feeling discouraged, and you hear a worship song that reminds you of God's faithfulness. You're making a difficult decision, and a song provides clarity or confirmation. This isn't limited to explicitly Christian music. God can speak through any song, any genre, any artist. What matters is the timing and the relevance to your situation. When a song speaks to your heart at the exact moment you need to hear it, that's often God's way of communicating with you. The same principle applies to movies, TV shows, books, articles, or social media posts that seem to address your exact situation. You might be scrolling through social media and see a post that perfectly captures what you're going through. You might watch a movie and hear a line that gives you the insight you've been seeking. You might read an article that provides the answer to a question you've been asking. These messages often come when you're not actively looking for them. You're relaxing, browsing, or being entertained, and suddenly you encounter something that speaks directly to your heart and situation. The unexpected nature of these encounters often makes them more powerful and memorable. The key to recognizing these silent messages is paying attention to your emotional and spiritual response. When something resonates deeply with you, when it feels like it was meant specifically for you, when it addresses a question you've been carrying, that's often God speaking through that medium. Don't dismiss these experiences as mere entertainment or coincidence. God can use any channel to communicate with you. He's not limited to church services or prayer times. He can speak through a song on your commute, a movie on a Friday night, or a book you picked up randomly. But sometimes God's messages come in ways that initially look like problems. The fourth type of silent message that God uses might surprise you. Obstacles, delays, and closed doors that initially seem frustrating but are actually divine redirections. What feels like God blocking your path is often God protecting your path. When you're heading in a direction that seems right to you, but obstacles keep appearing, God might be trying to redirect you towards something better. That job you didn't get might have protected you from a toxic work environment. That relationship that ended might have freed you for a healthier connection. That opportunity that fell through might have made space for something more aligned with your calling. The Bible tells us that God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. Sometimes what looks like a setback from our perspective is actually a setup from His perspective. What feels like rejection might actually be protection. What seems like a delay might actually be divine timing. These redirection messages often come in the form of doors that won't open no matter how hard you push, opportunities that keep slipping away, or plans that consistently fall apart. When this happens repeatedly in the same area of your life, God might be trying to get your attention and redirect your focus. The key is learning to distinguish between obstacles that you should push through and obstacles that you should pay attention to as divine redirections. Generally, if you're facing resistance in multiple areas related to the same goal, if circumstances consistently don't align despite your best efforts, or if you experience a lack of peace about pushing forward, these might be signs that God is redirecting you. This doesn't mean you should give up at the first sign of difficulty. It means learning to recognize patterns of resistance that don't make logical sense, especially when they're accompanied by other signs or confirmations that suggest God might be guiding you in a different direction. Sometimes these redirections protect you from danger you can't see. Sometimes they position you for opportunities you couldn't have imagined. Sometimes they develop character qualities in you that you'll need for your actual calling. The redirection isn't punishment. It's divine intervention on your behalf. When you encounter these types of obstacles, instead of immediately assuming something is wrong or that you're not capable, ask God if He's trying to redirect you. Pray for wisdom to discern between obstacles to overcome and obstacles that are actually divine guidance toward a different path. Look for patterns in the resistance you're facing. Are the obstacles consistently pointing you in a particular direction? Are there alternative paths that feel more aligned with peace? Are other people affirming a different direction for your life? But there's another type of message that's even more encouraging. The fifth silent message that God uses is provision that appears at exactly the right moment, often from unexpected sources. This isn't just about financial provision, though that's certainly included. This is about resources, opportunities, help, information, or solutions that show up precisely when you need them most. You're facing a financial need, and an unexpected check arrives in the mail. You need specific information, and someone mentions exactly what you need to know in casual conversation. You're looking for a particular item and find it on sale at exactly the right time. You need help with a project, and someone volunteers their assistance without you even asking. This type of provision often has a timing that's too perfect to be coincidental. It arrives not just when you want it, but when you actually need it. Sometimes it comes right before a deadline, right when your resources are exhausted, or right when you've reached the end of your own ability to provide for yourself. The Bible is full of examples of this type of divine provision. Elijah was fed by ravens during a drought. The widow's oil and flour never ran out during famine. Jesus provided fish and bread for thousands with just a few loaves and fish. God's provision often comes in ways that we couldn't have orchestrated ourselves. What makes this a silent message is that it demonstrates God's awareness of your needs and His commitment to providing for you. It's His way of saying, I see you, I know what you need, and I'm taking care of you. Each instance of perfectly timed provision is a reminder that you're not alone and that God is actively involved in your life. This provision often comes through channels you weren't expecting. It might come through people who barely know you, organizations you've never heard of, opportunities you weren't looking for, or circumstances that seemed completely unrelated to your need. The unexpected nature of the source often makes it clear that this is divine intervention rather than your own effort or planning. Sometimes this provision comes in forms you didn't anticipate. You pray for money and receive an opportunity to earn it. You ask for healing and discover information about a treatment that works. You need wisdom and encounter someone who's been through exactly what you're facing. The key to recognizing this silent message is paying attention to the timing and the source of provision in your life. When resources appear at exactly the right moment from unexpected directions, that's often God's way of demonstrating His care and involvement in your daily life. This message is particularly powerful when you're going through seasons of lack or uncertainty. Each instance of perfectly timed provision builds your faith and reminds you that God is your ultimate provider. It teaches you to look beyond your own resources and trust in His unlimited ability to meet your needs. But sometimes, God's messages come through what seem like interruptions. The sixth type of silent message that God uses is interruptions that initially seem inconvenient but turn out to be divine interventions. These are the unexpected changes to your plans that initially frustrate you but ultimately protect you or redirect you towards something better. Your flight gets delayed and you end up sitting next to someone who changes your perspective on a major decision. Your car breaks down, and while you're waiting for help, you have a conversation that leads to a new opportunity. You get sick and have to miss an event, only to later discover that something negative happened at that event. These interruptions often feel random and frustrating in the moment. You had plans, you were moving forward with your agenda, and suddenly something outside your control forces you to stop, wait, or change direction. But what initially seems like an inconvenience often turns out to be God's way of orchestrating something better. The key to recognizing these interventions is changing your perspective on interruptions. Instead of immediately assuming that any change to your plans is negative, start asking, what might God be doing through this interruption? What opportunity might this delay be creating? Who might I meet because of this change? What might I avoid because of this redirection? Sometimes these interruptions protect you from danger. That delayed departure keeps you from being in an accident. That canceled meeting prevents you from making a poor decision. That illness forces you to rest when your body desperately needs it, even though you wouldn't have chosen to slow down. Other times, these interruptions create opportunities you never would have found if your original plans had proceeded smoothly. You meet your future spouse because your flight was delayed. You discover your calling because an illness forced you to reassess your priorities. You find a better job because the one you wanted fell through. The Bible shows us that God often works through interruptions. Paul's missionary plans were interrupted by the Holy Spirit, leading him to Europe instead of Asia. Jonah's plans were interrupted by a storm and a fish, leading him to fulfill his calling in Nineveh. Joseph's plans were interrupted by slavery and prison, positioning him to save Egypt and his family from famine. These divine interruptions often have a quality of perfect timing and unexpected benefit that becomes clear in retrospect. What seemed like the worst possible timing turns out to be exactly the right timing. What felt like a setback turns out to be a setup for something better. To recognize this silent message, start paying attention to the outcomes of your interruptions. Keep track of how delays, cancellations, and unexpected changes to your plans ultimately work out. You might be surprised to discover a pattern of divine intervention disguised as inconvenience. When you experience an interruption, instead of immediately becoming frustrated, pause and ask God what He might be doing through this change. Be open to the possibility that this interruption might be an intervention designed for your benefit. But there's one final type of message that might be the most profound of all. The seventh and perhaps most profound silent message that God uses is placing people in your path who mirror either your current struggles or your potential growth. These are individuals whose stories, experiences, or characteristics reflect something significant about your own journey. Sometimes God sends you people who are facing exactly what you've already overcome. Meeting them gives you an opportunity to offer hope, share wisdom, and realize how far you've come in your own growth. Seeing someone struggle with something you've conquered reminds you of God's faithfulness in your life and gives you a chance to be His messenger to someone else. Other times, God introduces you to people who are where you want to be. They've overcome struggles you're currently facing, achieved goals you're working toward, or developed character qualities you're seeking to cultivate. These encounters aren't coincidental. They're God's way of showing you that growth is possible and providing you with living examples of what your future could look like. Sometimes these people mirror your current situation so precisely that it feels like looking into a spiritual mirror. They're dealing with the same type of relationship issues, facing similar career challenges, or struggling with identical fears. These encounters often serve multiple purposes. They remind you that you're not alone. They provide opportunities for mutual encouragement, and they help you see your situation from a different perspective. The Bible shows us this principle in action. David found strength by remembering how God had delivered him from lions and bears when he faced Goliath. Paul connected with Timothy partly because he saw potential in the young man that mirrored his own calling. Jesus chose disciples who would learn from each other's diverse backgrounds and experiences. These human mirrors often appear in unexpected places and times. You might meet someone at a coffee shop whose story perfectly parallels yours. You might sit next to someone on a plane who's exactly where you want to be in 5 years. You might encounter someone at a party who's struggling with the exact issue you've been praying about. The key to recognizing this silent message is paying attention to the people God brings into your life and the timing of these encounters. When someone's story resonates deeply with yours, when their experience directly relates to your current situation, or when their presence in your life feels divinely orchestrated, God might be sending you a message through that person. Sometimes the message is about hope, seeing that someone else has overcome what you're facing. Sometimes it's about purpose, realizing that your experience can help someone else. Sometimes it's about perspective, seeing your situation through someone else's eyes helps you understand it differently. These encounters often result in meaningful connections that extend beyond the initial meeting. You might develop friendships, mentoring relationships, or ministry partnerships with people who started as divine mirrors in your life. What begins as a silent message often develops into an ongoing relationship that continues to provide mutual growth and encouragement. When you meet someone whose story mirrors yours, ask God what He's trying to teach you through that encounter. Are you supposed to offer something to them? Are you supposed to learn something from them? Are you supposed to encourage each other? Are you being shown a glimpse of your own potential future? Now that you understand these 7 types of silent messages that God uses to communicate with you, your life will never be the same. You'll start recognizing divine communication everywhere. What once seemed like random coincidences will now appear as orchestrated encounters. What felt like meaningless interruptions will now be seen as meaningful interventions. The truth is, God has been speaking to you all along. He's been sending you messages through repeated numbers and patterns, through unexpected encounters with people, through dreams and songs and media that speak to your heart, through obstacles that redirect your path, through provision that appears just in time, through interruptions that become interventions, and through people who mirror your journey. You are not walking through life alone, unguided or forgotten. Every day, God is actively communicating with you, sending you messages of love, guidance, encouragement, and direction. The question isn't whether He's speaking. The question is whether you're listening with the right ears and looking with the right eyes. From this day forward, approach your life with expectancy. Wake up each morning knowing that God might send you a message through the most ordinary moments of your day. Pay attention to patterns, encounters, media, obstacles, provision, interruptions, and people. Ask yourself regularly, what is God trying to tell me right now? Keep a journal of these silent messages. Record the patterns you notice, the encounters you have, the songs that speak to you, the obstacles that redirect you, the provision that appears, the interruptions that turn into blessings, and the people who mirror your journey. Over time, you'll begin to see clear patterns of divine communication in your life. Remember that recognizing these messages takes practice. The more you pay attention, the more you'll see. The more you acknowledge God's communication, the more clearly you'll hear it. The more you respond to His silent messages, the more intimate your relationship with Him will become. Also remember that sometimes you are the message. God might use you to communicate with others through your words, your actions, your story, or simply your presence. When you feel prompted to speak to someone, help someone, or share something with someone, you might be delivering one of God's silent messages to them. Nothing in your life is random. Every encounter has potential significance. Every moment holds the possibility of divine communication. Every day is filled with opportunities to receive and deliver God's messages. So open your eyes, open your ears, and open your heart. God is speaking to you in ways you never realized. His silent messages are all around you, waiting to be discovered, decoded, and received. Your life is not a series of random events. It's a divine conversation between you and your Creator. Start listening. Start watching. Start recognizing. Because once you understand that nothing is random, everything becomes sacred, and every moment becomes an opportunity to encounter the God who loves you enough to weave His messages into the fabric of your everyday life. The conversation has been happening all along. Now you know how to participate in it.